Soil houses the resources and nutrients that are vital to our survival. It provides sustenance for everyone and offers those who cultivate it their means of living. What happens then if soil is lost or unable to be used? This issue has plagued us before, but have we as a society learned from it? I'm sure that in history courses over the years you've heard of the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. Agricultural labor gained popularity due to favorable growing conditions, the commodities produced sold for high prices, and the government's generous subsidies to farmers. After taking advantage of the land and soil for profit for so many years by means of overplowing and tilling, the soil was stripped of all nutrients. This, combined with drought throughout the country, effectively inhibited the soil from properly growing crops, specifically wheat, to harvest. Because of this, not only did many farmers lose their livelihood and experience devastating levels of poverty, but many mouths went unfed as wheat production fell. In terms of agricultural practices, the Dust Bowl played a huge role in the development of more sustainable techniques that aided in reducing soil erosion. Contour farming, terracing, and stir cropping are all products of the push for soil conservation that was born out of the Dust Bowl. The aftermath of the Dust Bowl led to a decrease in the popularity of till farming, so as not to disturb the soil. Crop rotation also became a more recognized method of farming post-Dust Bowl to help maintain the overall soil health. From an ethical standpoint, the Dust Bowl had a lasting impact on the collective ethics surrounding agricultural production and farming. It called for farmers and even the rest of the society to be responsible for the land that they work and live on. A consensus came about that there needs to be some obligation and collective responsibility to protect the land and environment for future generations. As the severe impacts of soil erosion became evident, there was a shift in collective awareness, a shift that leaned towards the preservation of natural resources and the prevention of environmental degradation. A commitment towards sustainable farming was prompted, so much so that agricultural stakeholders began to strongly promote ethical principles to those who worked for them. Along with the stakeholders and businessmen, the federal government even felt the call to action with the creation of Soil Conservation Service, which is now known as the Natural Resources Conservation Service. This service rewarded farmers financially for implementing sustainable agricultural practices and soil conservation techniques. With all these new practices and ideas adopted to combat soil erosion, there are still some shortcomings that should be considered. Climate change is occurring, and the frequent severe weather events that occur with it can increase soil erosion risks if precautions are already being taken. Traditional soil erosion prevention methods may not work as intended in the face of climate change. New precautions must be developed for our changing environment. Next, some corporations and commercial farmers refuse to use crop rotation and still rely on monoculture farming because it yields one crop efficiently and simply until it doesn't. In the short term, though, it increases the food supply of cash crops, thus makes major profit. This is why they do it, but in the end, it is bad for soil health. Finally, lack of education and access to sustainable techniques is prevalent and will always be an issue in rural communities, especially for family farmers. This, while seemingly unimportant to the big picture because we believe that commercial farms are the real damage to the environment, is actually detrimental when it's considered that 96% of all U.S. farms are family-owned, and the conditions on them could be majorly improved if only they had access to better resources. So what can we as agricultural and biological engineers do about these issues? To combat the lack of education and resources, we can extend services of education and advisory to farms, family or commercial, and aid in effectively implementing sustainable agriculture and soil conservation practices. When it comes to the issue of family farmers not having access to the newest sustainable agriculture technology, it is most likely due to cost. We as engineers can combat this by creating innovative, cost-effective, and easily usable technology for farmers to use.
One of the ways that biosystems works in this area is through biological means, vegetative establishment on eroded or disturbed lands. In fact, that's the gold standard for erosion control, is to have vegetation, grass, turf. So the turf matting is considered the easiest, quickest, and best method to cover disturbed soil.
And lastly, to combat abuse of natural resources and soil by commercial farming, we can advocate for new policies at the federal and local level, as well as advocate to further incentivize farmers to use sustainable practices.